A real-life disappearance in the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Trail. It's a green tunnel stretching almost 2,200 miles through the ancient, rolling mountains of the eastern United States. For thousands of people every year, hiking it represents a profound challenge, a pilgrimage, a chance to disconnect from the modern world and reconnect with something primal. For many, it's the journey of a lifetime, a true test of endurance and spirit. For 66-year-old Geraldine Largay, it was the fulfillment of a dream she'd held for years. A retired nurse from Tennessee, she had meticulously planned her section hike and had already covered more than 900 miles of the trail's rugged beauty. She was tenacious, friendly, and absolutely beloved by those she met along the path. They even gave her a trail name, Inchworm, for her slow but steady pace. In the summer of 2013, Gerry Largay was just days away from completing her epic journey. She had only 22 miles left to go to meet her husband at their next rendezvous point. But on July 22nd, in the dense, unforgiving wilderness of Maine, she stepped off the Appalachian Trail for just a moment. She would never find her way back. For over 2 years, her fate remained a complete mystery, fueling widespread speculation and a massive, fruitless search. No one knew what happened to her until her campsite, her remains, and a small, heartbreaking journal were discovered. She had survived for 26 days, lost and alone, documenting her final thoughts, her struggle, and her eventual acceptance of her fate. This is the story of what that journal said. Section 1. The Hiker. To really understand the tragedy of what happened in those woods, you first have to understand the woman who walked into them. Geraldine "Gerry" Largay was not some naive amateur who wandered into the wilderness unprepared. She was a planner, a doer, a woman defined by her compassion and her quiet determination. Born and raised with a spirit of adventure, she channeled her desire to help others into a long career as a nurse after serving in the Air Force. She eventually settled in Brentwood, Tennessee, with her husband, George. She was a wife, a mother to her daughter Carrie, and a doting grandmother. Her friends and family all used the same phrase to describe her, joie de vivre, a true joy for living. She was the kind of person who lit up a room, who sought out connection, and who wasn't afraid to push her own boundaries. The Appalachian Trail wasn't just a whim. It was a carefully considered bucket list item, the peak of a lifetime spent loving the outdoors. She and her husband George were a team. While hiking the entire trail wasn't on his personal bucket list, supporting his wife's dream absolutely was. He became her one-man support crew, driving their car to prearranged meeting points every few days to resupply her with food and fresh gear. He'd offer a warm meal and a soft place to sleep before she'd set off on the next leg of her journey. It was a system that worked beautifully for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Gerry had started her hike that April from Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, with her best friend, Jane Lee. Together, they tackled the trail, sharing the hardships and the triumphs. But partway through, a family emergency forced Jane to leave. Gerry was faced with a choice: stop her journey or continue on alone. True to her character, she chose to press on. She had come so far. She was an experienced hiker, but both her husband and friend noted she had a poor sense of direction and wasn't confident with a compass. Still, she had navigated this far without a major incident. She was so close to her next goal, Mount Katahdin, the trail's northern end in Maine. Other hikers who met her in those final days remember her being in high spirits, a friendly face at the trail shelters. She was known for her kindness and that steady pace that earned her the name Inchworm. On the morning of July 22, 2013, she was photographed at the Poplar Ridge Lean-To, a three-walled shelter where she'd spent the night. She was smiling, ready for the day. Her plan was simple: hike 8 miles to the next shelter, and then the next day, another 13 miles to the Route 27 crossing, where George would be waiting. It was a routine she had followed for months. But this time was different. This time, George would wait, and his inchworm would never arrive. Section 2. The Mistake. The section of the Appalachian Trail where Geraldine Largay got lost is in a part of Maine that is profoundly wild. The woods are a tangled, chaotic maze of thick underbrush, fallen trees, and a dense canopy that blots out the sun and sky. The terrain is a jumble of steep ravines, rocky outcrops, and boggy streams. It's beautiful, but it's also incredibly disorienting. Even for an experienced woodsman, a few steps in the wrong direction can be enough to lose all sense of bearing. The trail itself is just a thin, precious ribbon of clarity in a sea of green and brown confusion. On the morning of July 22nd, after leaving the Poplar Ridge lean-to, Jerry was making her way north. The weather was damp. Rain had been falling, making the ground slick and the air heavy. At some point that morning, she needed to use the bathroom. This is a perfectly normal, routine act for any hiker. She stepped off the narrow trail, looking for a private spot amidst the dense trees. Her friend Jane Lee would later tell wardens that Jerry was cautious and would never venture more than 100 feet from the path for this very reason. But on this day, in this particular patch of woods, something went wrong. When she finished, she turned to go back. But the trail was gone. Panic is a cold, creeping thing. In that moment, surrounded by a seemingly uniform wall of trees, every direction looks the same. Did she come from the left? Or was it behind that cluster of ferns? That large boulder looks familiar, but so does the one 20 feet away. The Maine Warden Service report suggests that after leaving the trail, she may have crossed a stream and then, in her attempt to return, became disoriented. We know from the data later recovered from her cell phone what she did next. Realizing she was in trouble, she did exactly what any of us would do. She reached for her phone. At 11:01 a.m., she typed out a text to her husband, George. It read, "In some trouble. Got off trail to go to BR. Now lost. Can you call AMC to see if a trail maintainer can help me? Somewhere north of Woods Road. XOX." But in the remote mountains of Maine, there was no cellular service. The message, a digital plea in a bottle, never sent. The phone's records show she didn't just try once. Gripped by a desperate hope, she tried to find higher ground, a clearing, anything that might give her a signal. Over the next hour and a half, she tried to send that same text message 10 more times. Each attempt was a failure, and each failure must have compounded the fear, the isolation. As the day wore on, her initial disorientation hardened into the terrifying certainty that she was truly lost. The 8-mile hike to the next shelter was now an impossible dream. She was alone, in a vast wilderness that seemed determined to swallow her whole. That night, she set up camp. The next day, July 23rd, she tried to text George again. At 4:18 p.m., another unsent message was logged in her phone. Lost since yesterday. Off trail 3 or 4 miles. Call police for what to do, please. XOX. She estimated she was 3 or 4 miles off the trail. In reality, her final campsite would be found only about 3,000 feet, just over half a mile, from the path she had left. But in that dense, tangled forest, it might as well have been 100 miles. She was trapped in a green cage, close enough to hear the world if it called, but completely invisible within it. Section 3. The Search. On July 24th, 2013, George Largay sat in his car at the designated meeting point on Route 27, waiting. He expected Jerry to arrive by the end of the day. When she didn't, he wasn't immediately overcome with worry. Delays happen on the trail. Maybe she was moving slower than expected or decided to stay an extra night at the shelter. He spent the night in his car, expecting to see her familiar, tired smile emerge from the woods in the morning. But when the morning of the 25th came and went with no sign of Jerry, George's concern turned to alarm. He knew his wife. She was meticulous. She stuck to the plan. Something was wrong. He contacted the authorities, and the Maine Warden Service was alerted. Geraldine Inchworm Largay was officially a missing person. This kicked off one of the largest and most intensive search and rescue operations in the history of the state of Maine. The response was immediate and massive. The Maine Warden Service coordinated a sprawling effort that included state police, national park rangers, local fire departments, and dozens of volunteer search and rescue teams. The search area was immense and brutally difficult. Wardens used maps to illustrate the sheer scale of the operation, a vast grid laid over some of the most rugged terrain on the East Coast. Teams on foot methodically combed the trail, side trails, logging roads, and drainages. They shouted her name, hoping for a reply that never came. Canine teams were brought in, their powerful noses trained to detect human scent, but their efforts were severely hampered. Heavy rain had fallen in the days after Jerry went missing, washing away potential tracks and dissipating any lingering scent trails. Helicopters and planes buzzed overhead, their observers scanning the endless green canopy for any sign of color, any break in the trees, any wisp of smoke. But Jerry's tent was under a thick stand of trees, making it completely invisible from the air. The psychological pressure on the searchers was immense. Lt. Kevin Adam of the Warden Service later described the agonizing frustration. They knew she was out there, somewhere in that vast wilderness, but the forest held its secrets tight. The searchers were battling not just the terrain, but the environment itself. The dense woods could muffle a shout from just 100 yards away. It was, as one searcher described it, like looking for a needle in a haystack, where the haystack was 1,000,000 acres of identical-looking trees. Making matters worse were the false leads and unsubstantiated sightings. Well-meaning hikers reported seeing Jerry in various locations, each tip requiring wardens to divert precious time and resources to investigate, only to find it was a case of mistaken identity. Wild theories circulated, as they often do, ranging from abduction to animal attacks, further muddying the waters. For 12 grueling days, the intensive search continued. Search logs and reports show that on several occasions, rescue teams came agonizingly close to her location. It's believed that searchers were, at times, within 100 yards of her small, hidden campsite. She may have even heard them, her hopes surging, only to have it extinguished as the sounds of her potential rescuers faded away. It's a truly heartbreaking thought. Salvation was so close, yet so impossibly far. After nearly 2 weeks of exhaustive effort with not a single clue found, no gear, no footprint, no sign of her passing, the official, large-scale search was suspended. Periodic searches would continue for the next 2 years, but as far as the world was concerned, Geraldine Largay had vanished. The trail had taken her. Section 4. The Journal. While hundreds of people searched and her family waited in agony, Jerry Largay was fighting a silent, solitary battle for survival. Lost and alone, she did what she could. She found a small knoll, a slightly raised piece of ground, and set up her tent. With remarkable foresight, she built a platform out of pine needles and dirt to keep her sleeping bag off the damp ground. She had her tent, her sleeping bag, some food, and she had a black journal and a pen. In May of 2016, the Maine Warden Service released over 1,500 pages of documents related to the case. Among them were the contents of her phone and, most poignantly, the story told by her final journal. It was titled, "George, Please Read Zoxo." Her entries, dated for 26 days, paint a devastating portrait of dwindling hope, profound loneliness, and incredible resilience. The journal begins the day she got lost, July 22nd. The early entries show her initial attempts to find the trail. She wrote that after getting disoriented, she spent the next couple of days wandering, hiking from ridge to ridge, trying to get her bearings. She repeatedly climbed to high ground, not just for a better view, but in a desperate, failed attempt to get a cell signal. Her entries show a mind grappling with the grim reality of her situation. She rationed her food. Evidence at her campsite suggests she tried to start signal fires. Char marks were found on nearby trees, likely from her own hand trying to create a column of smoke. But the wood was likely too damp, the canopy too thick. Her signals went unseen. She was a nurse, trained to care for others, but she was also human. The case files revealed that Jerry had phobias of being alone and of the dark. Now, she was forced to confront those fears every single day and every single night. Alone in her small tent, with the alien sounds of the forest pressing in, the darkness must have been an oppressive, terrifying force. As the days turned into a week, then two, the tone of the journal began to shift. The initial focus on self-rescue gave way to a profound sense of resignation. She must have spent every waking hour listening, praying to hear a shout, a whistle, the chop of a helicopter's blades. The fact that rescuers came so close, yet never found her, is perhaps the most tragic irony of her story. On August 6th, 2 full weeks after she disappeared, Geraldine Largay picked up her pen and wrote what she must have believed would be her final message. She tore a page from her journal. On it, she wrote a note not of anger or despair, but of love and pragmatic kindness. "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie," she wrote. "It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now. Please find it in your heart to mail the contents of this bag to one of them." It is a message of incredible strength. In what she knew were likely her final days, her primary concern was for her family. She wanted to spare them the unending pain of not knowing. She was giving them the one last gift she could, the gift of certainty. Even after writing this, she held on. The journal shows daily entries until August 10th, then a gap. The final entry is dated August 18th, 2013, 26 days after she stepped off the trail. After that, the journal falls silent. The medical examiner would later determine her cause of death as inanition, exhaustion from lack of nourishment, and environmental exposure. She died in her sleeping bag, inside the tent she had called home for her final, terrible 26 days. Section 5. The Discovery. For more than 2 years, the Woods kept their secret. George, Carrie, and the rest of Jerry's family were left in a state of agonizing limbo. The Maine Warden Service never officially closed the case, but with no new leads, it grew cold. Geraldine Largay became another ghost of the Appalachian Trail, her story a cautionary tale told around campfires. Then, on October 14th, 2015, the secret was finally revealed. A forestry surveyor for the U.S. Navy was on a remote piece of property used for their survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, or SEER, training program. As the surveyor made his way through the dense, pathless woods about half a mile from the trail, he stumbled upon something out of place, a collapsed tent. Inside, he found human remains. He immediately backed away and notified the authorities. The Maine Warden Service responded to the scene. It was Jerry. Her final camp was on a small knoll under a thick canopy, just as the journal would later describe. The site was so well hidden that it was virtually impossible to spot from the air and easy to miss on the ground unless you walked right up to it. This finally explained why the massive search, with its helicopters and ground teams, had failed. They had been looking, but they simply couldn't see her. Along with her remains, they found her belongings. Her backpack, her sleeping bag, her map. They found her cell phone, its battery long dead, but its memory intact, holding the unsent messages that told the story of her first desperate hours. And they found the black journal, the one titled, "George, Please Read Zoxo." The discovery was a moment of profound sadness and, for her family, a long-awaited, heartbreaking resolution. Lieutenant Kevin Adam of the Warden Service called it a happy, sad day. Sad for the confirmation of her death, but a relief that she had finally been found, that she could be brought home. The mystery of what happened to Inchworm was over, but the heartbreaking story of her final days was just beginning to be understood. Section 6. The Aftermath and Conclusion. The discovery of Geraldine Largay's journal turned a missing person case into one of the most poignant survival stories in the history of the Appalachian Trail. The case file released by the Maine Warden Service offered an unprecedented look into the anatomy of a wilderness tragedy. The final page of her journal, the one addressed to whoever would find her, became her lasting epitaph. It was a testament to her character, brave, considerate, and loving to the very end. The medical examiner's report confirmed what the journal suggested. There was no foul play, no single catastrophic event. She had simply succumbed to starvation and exposure after a remarkable 26-day struggle. For her family, the discovery brought a painful end to years of uncertainty. In a statement, they expressed their immense gratitude to all the searchers who had worked tirelessly to find her. They asked for privacy as they processed the news, finally able to grieve. Her husband, George, who had so faithfully supported her dream, now had the devastating certainty he had been spared for 2 years. Her granddaughter later left a simple, powerful message on a wooden cross placed at her final resting place. "I wish you were here." The case of Geraldine Largay has become a powerful and sobering lesson in the hiking community. Her story highlights several critical points. First, the fallibility of navigation. Jerry was an experienced hiker, but as her friend noted, she had a poor sense of direction and lacked confidence using a map and compass. In the disorienting Maine woods, this weakness proved fatal. Her story is a stark reminder that even with modern GPS, fundamental navigation skills are non-negotiable. Second, the limitations of technology. Jerry's cell phone was her lifeline, but without a signal, it was useless for communication. This has led to a much broader conversation about carrying dedicated satellite communication devices, like a personal locator beacon, PLB. It was later reported that Jerry owned a satellite GPS device but had left it in her hotel room. That one decision may have been the difference between life and death. And finally, her story reveals the powerful role of psychology in a survival situation. The decision to stay put is often the correct one for a lost hiker, and Jerry did this. She made a camp and waited. But her fear of being alone and in the dark, coupled with the sheer density of her location, created a tragic paradox. The place she chose for shelter, a place that felt safe to her, was also the place that made her invisible. Rescuers came within 100 yards, but they couldn't see or hear her, and she couldn't see or hear them. The story of Geraldine Inchworm Largay is a tragedy. It's the story of a dream cut short, of a small mistake with catastrophic consequences. But it is also a story of incredible endurance, of a woman who faced the end with a courage and grace that is difficult to comprehend. For 26 days, she survived. She fought, she waited, and she wrote. In the end, her journal ensured that she was not just another person who vanished in the wilderness. It ensured that her story and its vital lessons would be told. The Appalachian Trail remains a place of beauty and challenge, but Jerry Largay's story is a permanent and solemn reminder of its unforgiving nature. What are your thoughts on this heartbreaking story? Have you ever had an experience where a small mistake in the outdoors nearly led to a serious situation? Share your reflections in the comments below. Her story is a powerful reminder for all of us to stay prepared, stay safe, and respect the power of the wild.